lives this high life. She makes you see, this money, this how she's living and how amazing it is. What you don't realize is that's your money.
It's very evil, because she only think about herself, her happiness. If she rob you or take your money or whatever, she don't care.
It's what I learned from her, dealing with such a person. She's a sweet talker, convincing.
When she looks at you, she knows how she can attack your weaknesses and win you over. Either she will win you with charm, that fails forcefully.
They asked me in court, when I appeared in court, what caused the end of the friendship. And I said, the day that she looked me in the eye and lied to me about stealing from my brother, because I'm her best friend.
Well done, Tracy. That worked just fine.
Hey, baby, and thank you for helping. Mwah, I love you.
Behind me is Johannesburg Correctional Services, and the women's section will be home to Tracy Morrison for the next 6 years. Right up until the day of her sentencing in November last year, she was still scamming innocent victims. In 2018, we investigated the serial fraudster, and while she might not rank as South Africa's most infamous fraudster, and certainly not its wealthiest, her case must certainly rank as one of its most bizarre.
She wanted people who were perhaps going through a little bit of a difficult time. I think she also tapped on people who she could easily mold, perhaps who were financially able to become a part of her web and her business. And then she looked for the people she could manipulate.
Morrison's crimes spanned over a 30-year period during which she entrapped her targets in much the same way that sexual predators groom their victims.
If you talk to the victims, they each give you a different variation of the fraud that was perpetrated. She's adapted each and every time. She displays every indication of being a sociopath. She will, in some instances, display a lot of empathy and sympathy for her victims while she's lining them up for the fraud. And once she's defrauded them, her attitude will change completely towards them. She'll become aggressive, and she will actually start playing the victim.
Over the years, she wove a star-spangled tapestry of her life in which she was a Hollywood-born and bred movie mogul, duping her targets into bankrolling her bogus business deals and lavish lifestyle.
She'd lived next door to Clint Eastwood.
The claim that she was Al Pacino's illegitimate daughter.
She lied in order to exert power over her own reality and others, using a string of aliases like the name Gina Latham, who she pretended was her daughter, or Natasha Worthington, her fictitious assistant. She cast her victims in the roles of unwitting extras to legitimize fake interior design companies while she was defrauding them. Her locations were the most glamorous homes in Johannesburg's northern suburbs that she pretended to own, and her crime scenes included Sandton Police Station. There, she pretended to be an FBI investigator and, aided, allegedly, by former police officers, she scammed companies and individuals out of millions.
She told us that she'd been a part of the FBI. From there, she'd been, from what I understood, recruited to South Africa to be part of a special force of some sort in Johannesburg. She also mentioned that during all her exploits, she'd been shot, I think, 3 times.
The first time we met her, she came to our conference room and put the wallet on the table with the badge in the wallet. Didn't claim that was a police badge or an FBI badge, but then started talking about her credentials and involvement with the FBI. And she put a firearm on the table as well, not kind of displaying it, just like, oh, this is uncomfortable, and put it next to the badge.
In 2018, Special Assignment conducted an exclusive investigation into Morrison. We uncovered a laundry list of alleged crimes ranging from petty theft to serious fraud, including scamming 350,000 rand from a young family who had saved the funds for their children's education.
I think that's probably what guts me the most, is Nick supported me on something like a loving husband should do, and I naively believed and trusted in someone. I've never come across anyone so amazing at lying and so amazing at putting you in a position that you feel like this person would never do you wrong.
We also unearthed a heap of charge dockets, many of them still open, for crimes stretching back to the 1980s.
I then established that she indeed had previous convictions. She had previously been convicted of check fraud. That was around 1983.
And although her scams straddled neighbourhoods as diverse as Joburg's inner city and its plush northern suburbs, we focused on Sandton, her main hunting ground. With the assistance of a former landlord and a forensic investigation, we confronted her at one of the homes she was pretending to own. It was a case of history repeating itself. I'd first exposed her way back in 1998.
I've had a similar conversation with you before, 20 years ago. Except it wasn't nearly at the severity that it is now. Then I just thought you were not well, and I thought that there was this extreme need for validation and to impress people and to be loved and admired.
There was that a long time ago, that's true.
No more. Now it is just a big, fat con.
A formidable tsunami which is rising against you here. And I'm quite certain that once your face is on television, there will be plenty more people to come forward. And there might be so many people that proper jail time becomes absolutely unavoidable.
Several courageous complainants charged her with fraud, forgery, identity theft and intimidation, with the hope that once she was convicted, more would follow.
I'm very sad, I'm very angry. Because I helped her with all of my heart. Now I help her. She didn't appreciate that.
Morrison was arrested in September 2018 and remanded to the Johannesburg Women's Prison, where she was detained for almost a year without bail. Tracy Morrison spent 9 months awaiting trial before her case was brought before the Randburg Magistrates Court in May 2019. For scores of victims, her arrest signified a victory. Throughout 2018, they had banded together on social media to provide mutual support and to monitor her every move.
If I can do one more day with her, just one more, just to try and see where she would go, how we could catch her.
We are closing in on Tracy, we are stopping her, we're doing all of this harm to so many people. And yes, the tables have turned, and she's no longer the hunter.
Sandton Police Station had initially displayed reluctance to process criminal charges against Morrison. But after Special Assignment complained of alleged corruption, a provincial task team was established to investigate, and the station became more receptive to Morrison's victims. Their charges included fraud, forgery, identity theft, and intimidation. The only charge that wasn't included was impersonating a police officer.
We know the stories that follow you from America. It's getting very small for you now.
And speaking of America, what's with impersonating an FBI agent?
That I have no idea.
What about
You know,
the
I was
fake American accent that you just dropped into recently?
We were confident that she would be convicted. But in October 2019, Morrison was acquitted on all charges. We contacted the state prosecutor at the Randburg court to find out what had gone wrong.
The cases that we had were the cases that we had a prima facie case in order to charge her on, so that she could face the charges that fell within our jurisdiction.
But the more serious fraud charges against Morrison, like the 350,000 rand she had allegedly scammed from a young couple, were omitted. Sandton Police Station had transferred the docket to Honeydew, and the complainants were never called to testify. And no reference was made to Morrison's lengthy criminal record leading back to the 1980s.
I received a call around about September 2018 to say that Ms. Morrison was arrested and she has a whole long list of cases against her. I notified the prosecution here at Randburg, who then requested that whatever pending dockets there are for Ms. Morrison, they should bring it to them. Insofar as the cases that were brought, the only one that I'm aware of at this stage, at that time, was the one where she was impersonating an FBI agent. Each court works on the jurisdictions. So we prosecuted the matters that fell within our jurisdiction. In this particular matter of the impersonation, fell outside our jurisdiction, and it had to be referred to another court, that being Kempton Park, where the incident took place.
The Kempton Park incident dates back to 2005. Acting under the guise of the FBI, Morrison conducted a bogus investigation into a robbery at a global engine technology company called Cummins. For this con, she was paid hundreds of thousands of rands.
The robbery was reported to our local police station, which happened to be Sandton at that time. And we were told that there was going to be an investigation.
But then the police investigation stopped.
The boss called me into his office and he said that he had employed someone to handle the investigation and that it was an FBI agent. And I sort of laughed a little bit, and he looked at me as if to say, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "There are no FBI agents in South Africa."
Eventually, Morrison's FBI scam was exposed. In 2018, the Provincial Task Team, established in response to Special Assignments complaints, took affidavits from former Cummins employees. But the police have yet to charge Morrison for impersonating a police officer.
I personally think she should be locked away for the rest of her life.
Furthermore, during the 2019 trial, after which she was acquitted, crucial supporting witnesses were not called to testify to her modus operandi.
For example, we've got tenancy agreements where she poses as a landlord of a property that she clearly doesn't own and also goes by the now infamous alias Gina Latham. Then there are the letters of appointment to her bogus businesses where she employed young, impressionable, mainly women, and promised them handsome salaries, good commissions to supposedly market her business, be a sales consultant, and get clients for her interior design company, a company which to all intents and purposes did not exist.
All the witnesses testified in this particular matter. There were supporting documents handed in. For example, there was supporting documents in the form of bank proof of payments, in which the witnesses handed into court as exhibits.
But there was no attempt to follow the trail of money after her alleged victims had deposited the funds into Morrison's account, and to investigate how the money earmarked for so-called investments was actually spent. The magistrate ruled that there was insufficient evidence to prove criminal intent to defraud the complainants. Therefore, Morrison's case was not a criminal matter, but rather a contractual dispute, which made it a civil case.
The defense at all material times were arguing that these matters stem out of a contractual obligation, and as such, they lack the element of fraud.
Just because there's a contract in place doesn't make something legal. Any document can be fabricated. And because it's in a contract and they say they're going to raise this money for you, doesn't make it any more legitimate than what it is. And what it is a totally illegal scheme. It's a way of trying to part you with your money.
In a criminal case, it's more to do with intent and a crime that has been committed. In a civil matter, it's just to get back the money that you have lost. The tests are different. There's a stricter test on a criminal case because you have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil matter, it's on a balance of probabilities.
So Morrison was let off the hook yet again, acquitted of fraud and set free to continue her scams. It was back to business as usual. The acquittal of Tracy Morrison in the 2019 trial raises disturbing questions given the overwhelming evidence of her criminality during that time, as well as decades prior to her acquittal.
There is actually a small flaw in the system, unless the suspect has been charged. The police will not find that on the system. It would have been easier to then combine all these cases. It's always better in order to prove a modus operandi, a pattern, if these cases are centralized.
I find this quite bizarre because she's known to the authorities. She's known to the authorities as having been a con artist in the past. She's known to the authorities as having multiple cases opened against her. If multiple cases have been opened where different frauds have been perpetrated against them, but the common denominator is one particular individual, then this has to be investigated. And if those dockets are not being investigated, it means that there could be corruption.
I went through the investigation to draw those dockets and also to interview the victims in question. To my surprise, by trying to allocate those dockets, I couldn't.
Why not?
Some of the dockets were messed up.
Were they from different police
The
stations?
different police stations. And I didn't have a reason why those dockets could not be traced.
Captain Joel Ngobeni is a retired Hawks police officer. He closely followed the 2019 trial in which Morrison was acquitted because as far back as 2005, he was already investigating Morrison for fraud and impersonating a police officer.
I received an inquiry from one of the bank officials, if I can remember correctly. It was NetBank. And the inquiry was about the allegation led by different victims, saying that a lady by the name of Tracy Morrison is claiming to be an FBI official and being working together with the Department of Justice, also with the Department of Home Affairs.
Together with attorney Oscar Murovi of the NPA, who prosecuted the case from 2013, Captain Ngobeni was determined to bring Morrison to book. In fact, while Morrison was allegedly committing the crimes for which she stood trial in 2019, she was being tried for this very case in the Palm Ridge Commercial Crimes Court and was out on bail at the time.
What struck me when I opened the docket was the involvement of FBI. That scared me, that the FBI had an interest in this matter. And we had a letter from the embassy of the US, obviously confirming that they don't know Miss Tracy Morrison, and further registering their concern an interest that these allegations should be investigated.
In 2007, Morrison was officially charged. The main complainant was the owner of a company called PPE Technologies in Nelspruit. He accused Morrison of defrauding him of around 1.7 million rand over several years.
Tracy Morrison was referred to me by my sister Cecily, and that was around about January 2005.
The complainant's sister had been befriended by Morrison around 2000, shortly after Morrison had supposedly returned to South Africa from the USA.
American accent, she'd just come back from America, she said, and she was settling in.
Miss Morrison has never been out of the country.
She hasn't?
Never. We obtained evidence from the Department of Home Affairs with her movement control, not only once, but we obtained 2 different affidavits. They confirmed that she had never been out of the country.
Tracy's way of operating was to befriend you immediately, invite you to her house, and she draws you in like that.
I'd been in the United States, my wife and I, on business, and I would become very ill with malaria that was undiagnosed. And it was in that period that our financial manager found that there was some petty cash fraud going on in our business. And we had reported the SAP, and nothing seemed to be happening. Cecily said, "Oh, wow, she has a friend who deals with the police and the Department of Justice, and this lady seems to work wonders, and could she refer her to us?" She was very confident, very convincing, and very involved in saying, "Oh, wow, we can solve this quickly. We can get to the bottom of this, and the state can probably recover the money that had been stolen." And there was a whole stream of wonderful promises on how she deals with the Department of Justice and who her connections are.
I mean, she went down to Nelspruit with the policeman, and then his whole story of how it unfolded, where there was stamp duties and court costs, and you got to pay for this and you got to pay for that.
She told us is that she wouldn't be taking any payment for herself through the process, and there would be costs and dispersable expenses for the investigating team.
McAllister had already opened a docket of theft against his employee at the Nelspruit police station.
She said to us at the Nelspruit police station, the investigating officer was not handling the case. It was just a number one of many cases. And the only way she could help us is if we transferred the case to an area where she had contacts and where she could get more involved. And she recommended that we transfer the case to the Sandton police station. Afterwards, we discovered it was closed the case and never opened anything at the Sandton police station.
When Morrison failed to deliver, McAllister became suspicious.
Of course, you have a doubt, because by then I realized how much had gone into this whole thing and where we were. And although you get a feeling of you've been duped, part of you still wants to believe that you haven't been duped.
Then when he really did stop paying, she said to me, "I think your brother thinks that I'm taking him for a ride." And she looked me in my eyes and she said, "But I would never do that to him. He's your brother and you are my best friend."
In our next episode, we will unpack all the bizarre details of Morrison's modus operandi, scripted like a thriller, involving fraud, attempted bribery, and police complicity. This marathon case and trial would finally turn the tide against her.